you are doing this.
Oh, really? Why?
Yes, because I am gonna put an injunction against you.
Oh, you're going to put an injunction? I don't think you can get an injunction. There's this thing called the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They already tried to get an injunction. What?
Not to insult others.
Sorry?
Not to insult. You're insulting.
No, I'm telling the truth. I'm just these are factual statements.
What truth? They didn't let you speak here.
No.
No.
No. You got it all wrong. You got it. No, maybe you should pull your head out of your ass because you're willfully ignorant.
You are so rude.
Yes, I mean, you know how rude I am? I'm as rude as Reverend Dr. Victoria Weinstein and other extremely rude Unitarian Universalist ministers. I'm as rude as Reverend Ray Drennan. I'm as rude as I'm as rude as Unitarian Universalist ministers. It's part of my protest. So do try to get that injunction. Good luck with it, because you're gonna need luck. I think they already tried to get an injunction quite a few times. So this woman is saying she's going to get an injunction because I'm insulting. Well, excuse me, but if you read the picket signs, if you read the chalk slogans, they are not insults per se. They are factual statements that are provable in a court of law. Unitarian Universalists cover up and deny sexual abuse of children. This is a factual statement that can easily be proven to be true in a court of law. Now, it may also be somewhat insulting, but it's clearly not intended as an insult. You know, if I wanted it to be clearly insulting, I'd say batshit crazy Unitarians cover up and deny sexual abuse of children. But that's not what it says. And even if I did say batshit crazy Unitarians cover up and deny sexual abuse of children, while it might be additionally somewhat insulting, but it would be true. It would be true. You know, the Unitarian Universalists who try to cover up and deny sexual abuse of children committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers are insane in the broader sense of the word. They are delusional. They are self-deluded and so on. They are just stunningly foolish to try and hide something that can easily be proven to be true. So again, you know, let's have a look at this picket sign. You know, Church of the Image Tarnishing Ministers. You know, what's really insulting about that? It's a statement of fact. It's a fact that Unitarian Universalist ministers, such as Reverend Ray Drennan and other Unitarian Universalists, tarnish the image of Unitarian Universalism. So, looks like we got some more of those butterflies fluttering about. Well, there seem to be fewer of them today. We had quite a number of painted lady butterflies coming through town earlier. So. Anywho, looks like a few stragglers showing up at the Unitarian Church of Montreal about 15 minutes after the service has started. One thing I noticed is, you know, Reverend Diane Roller did step out briefly just before the beginning of the service, or maybe even a little after it was supposed to have started, to welcome anyone in, but there was nobody to welcome in. It seems the turnout today is quite low, actually. So it seems that maybe Reverend Diane Roller was, you know, hoping for some more people to show up today. But apparently, from what I've seen, not a great many people have shown up for today's service. You know, some of the people that have shown up are faces that are not familiar to me. In terms of familiar faces, you know, people who are regular attendees of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, I can't say I've seen all that many. So maybe some newcomers, maybe some out-of-town people. Who knows? But not a whole lot of regular members showed up today for some reason. Anyhow, let's get back to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Unitarians do, in fact, cover up sexual abuse of children in various ways. One way in which they unsuccessfully tried to cover up the sexual abuse of children committed by Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell and Richard Buell was to falsely accuse me of violating Canada's blasphemy law and legal bullying that was clearly intended to cover up and possibly even outright deny such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers. Yes, these picket sign slogans are all very, very truthful and supported by evidence, often supported by, court records or newspaper reports, and so on. So literally no difficulty to prove as being true in a court of law. So unfortunately for Unitarian Universalists, the truth is on my side when it comes to this protest and when it comes to my blog post, and it's absolutely not on the side of stunningly foolish and outrageously hypocritical Unitarian Universalists who try to, conceal the truth or outright deny the truth or misrepresent the truth and twist the truth and so on. That's something that Unitarian Universalists are guilty of repeatedly. It's not something that I can be accused of. I mean, yes, I do engage in a certain amount of parody and satire where the truth is exaggerated or changed up somewhat in the parody or satire, but it's clearly parody and satire, and it actually is very truthful. Like when you understand what the parody and satire is about, the issues that it's about are very truthful. So, when it comes to making statements of fact, I can assure people that my statements of fact are much more solidly founded on truth than those made by Unitarian Universalist ministers and Unitarian Universalist Association leaders who are seeking to hide the truth. Outright lies told by some top-level Unitarian Universalist Association leaders and prominent Unitarian Universalist clergy. But one of the most brazen, bald-faced lies that constitutes an outright denial of any sexual abuse of children is the brazen, bald-faced lie that UUA moderator Jim Key told in what was supposed to be an apology to victims of clergy sexual misconduct that he very inappropriately wedged into the middle of his first moderator's report to a General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association in 2014. Jim Key, amongst other mendacious and at best misleading statements, said the following words: "There were no incidents of abuse of children or elders in my investigation." So this was in the middle of his apology to victims of clergy sexual abuse, clergy sexual misconduct, if you want to use a lighter term. But more and more, knowing that rape and pedophilia and sexual assault are part and parcel of what Unitarian Universalists term clergy misconduct, I think it's better to use the term abuse, even when it's less serious misconduct. But because misconduct, generally speaking, it sounds a bit like misdemeanor. It minimizes the seriousness of what goes on. I think abuse is a much better word to describe it. Anyhow, this was an outright lie that Jim Key told. He knew perfectly well that some children had in fact been forcibly raped by Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell, and he also knew that other children had been sexually abused by Unitarian Universalist ministers, to say nothing of Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers, but he chose to outright lie in an apology of all things. And so we got another straggler showing up for the church service, good 15 or 20 minutes late. So I felt she wanted to say something, but I think she knew my camera was running and therefore refrained from saying whatever she wanted to say, because she has, in the fact, basically berated me in the past, you know, on video. So, you know, she's up there on YouTube amongst my protest videos, which document what happens during my protests. So anyhow, she obviously wasn't too happy to see my chalk slogans and picket signs. Anyway, getting back to that woman who said she's going to seek an injunction against me. Well, I would actually enjoy that because, you know, in seeking an injunction against me, you know, she would have to make various representations about my protest, and obviously, you know, make representations that present my protest as being somehow illegal, because that's what an injunction's for, is to stop illegal actions. I think she would actually be very, very hard pressed to find any things that I have said or done in my protest that warrant an injunction. You know, illegal acts, there's very, very little that I've done that can be properly described as illegal. You know, Unitarian Universalists, Montreal Unitarians, have repeatedly misused the you know, criminal code and Montreal city bylaws to try and shut down this protest in the past. I've actually been falsely charged with violating section 176.3 of the Canadian Criminal Code, which prohibits the disruption of the order and solemnity of church services. This happened in December of 2003. It was early December of 2003. I was protesting outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal, and I was arrested by a SPVM police officer by the name of Anthony Pompa. And when I asked him, you know, why I was being arrested, he said public nuisance, and or maybe, yeah, I think it was public nuisance, he said, and I almost took that as a compliment, quite frankly. You know, it turned out that I'd been specifically arrested and charged with violating section 176.3 of the Canadian Criminal Code. So I got a nice thumbs up there from the cyclist, and a big smile too. And this section of the Canadian Criminal Code prohibits disrupting the order and solemnity of church services. So it's pretty obvious that it's about actual disruption of church services. It can't really be applied to a protest that takes place outside the church, but that's exactly what Unitarians at the Unitarian Church of Montreal did. I think they had some help from Jeremy Searle, a Montreal City Councillor, an NDG City Councillor. He wrote letters to the police, you know, basically demanding that they do something and insisting that they you know, have me arrested or whatever. But this is the interesting thing, this is where it ties in with an injunction. What I understand happened is, based on what other people have told me since, is that, you know, initially the church sought an injunction against me. They tried to get an injunction to force an end to my protest, and they were told, you know, by the legal authorities, well, you know, there's this thing called the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and, you know, you just can't go and get an injunction to stop a protester. You know, the only circumstance under which you can get an injunction to prevent a protester from protesting is if he can be shown to have committed a criminal act in the course of his protesting. So, you know, they had a Queen's Counsel lawyer who was a member of the church, a guy by the name of Kenneth Howard QC, and I have reasonable grounds to believe that he scoured through the Canadian Criminal Code, you know, maybe with other members of the church, and found section 176.3, and said, oh, let's have Robin charged with you know, this, you know. And, you know, so I was arrested and charged, and you know, I contacted the prosecutor and said, look, you know, I'm outside the church, I'm not making any loud noises, I'm pretty well invisible, from inside the church. You know, how could I possibly be guilty of disrupting the order and solemnity of church services? And he said, oh, I have witnesses, you know, so he refused to drop the charges. He actually did offer to drop the charges if I agreed to a peace bond, which would have prevented me from protesting outside the church. Essentially, so in other words, if I you know, essentially accepted a restraining order that would prevent me from protesting outside the church for at least a year, then he would drop the charges. And I said no, because I knew I was innocent. I knew that their chances of finding me guilty were like almost zero. So I defended myself in court, and I won. Because what it comes down to is they were unable to prove that I could be heard inside the church. In fact, at least one of the witnesses, if not both of them, one of them being Jeremy Searle, did in fact say that I can't be heard. One of the witnesses tried to say that I could be seen from inside the church, but he was really pushing his luck there. This is the sanctuary of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. Whoops, it is. What's going on here? Okay, so this is the sanctuary, and we can see that there's basically 4 windows, 2 up high and 2 down below, but both of them, even the lower windows, are above my head. The one over there is totally blocked by a memorial to the firemen who were killed when the transsexual organist of the previous incarnation of the Unitarian Church of Montreal burned down the church, and I believe the wall collapsed on them. So this is really the only window where I might possibly be seen, you know, and the person would have to pretty well